Hello, my name is Maria Harney, and today we're delving into debate on morality. Are there absolute moral truth, or do values change based on cultural and historical context? Let's see why this subject matters. Moral disagreements drive many social and political conflicts, as evident by examples from the 20th century. There have been many research studies on the Second World War and Nazi Germany, and one of the examples is the Max Planck Society research that sheds light on how eugenics and racial ideology shaped scientific practices during the Third Reich. Is moral doing, such as Nazi-era use of human subjects in research, universally condemned, or it depend on and shaped by cultural, political, and ideological context of that time? Another reason to explore the nature of morality is because by examining universal versus cultural morality will help us coexist better, understand what might be universal truth versus the truth formed through cultural and historical lenses. Let's take a look what great thinkers thought of the universal morality. Plato saw the form of the good as the universal ideal. In Phaedo, Socrates talks about forms as unchanging universal realities that exist beyond the physical world. We can only grasp them through reason. Let's take the beauty, for example. Something is beautiful because it participates in a form of beauty, but the two aren't the same. Socrates believed in possibility of higher knowledge attainment through virtues and philosophical inquiry. Aristotle saw morality as universal in principle but shaped by culture and context. He believed in virtue ethics. Qualities like courage and justice are always valuable, but how they apply depends on the situation. Morality for him was about finding the balance, the golden mean between the extremes. For Aquinas, he viewed morality as universal, rooted in natural law, which reflects eternal truth accessible through human reason. However, he acknowledged that cultural and historical contexts influence how those principles are applied. Immanuel Kant, moral law, he believed that morality is universal and changing and based on reason, not the culture or history. In his categorical imperatives, he says that moral principles must apply to everyone and always. Right actions are those that could become universal laws. For example, truth-telling or promise-keeping. Unlike Aristotle, Kant saw morality as the rational duty, not shaped by society and consequence. Leibniz hold similar views in that they both believed, Kant and Leibniz, that morality is not purely subjective or cultural, but grounded in universal principles. However, Leibniz argued that moral laws reflect the divine rational order. Let's take a look at Kenneth Gallagher and his philosophy of knowledge, where he argues that universal truths like God, love, and beauty exist, but our understanding of them is shaped by history and culture. And rather than opposing each other, universal truth and cultural context work together, allowing timeless ideas to grow within our human experiences. Now that we took a look at the universal morality perspectives, let's take a look at the cultural morality. Ethical standards evolve based on culture, history, society, meaning what is considered moral can differ across time and place. And who is to judge upon who is right? Few examples. Morally ambiguous marital traditions, child marriage, bride price, polygamy. How about moral dilemma that concerns our everyday lives? The moral conflict between meat eaters and vegetarians often centers around the ethical implications of animal suffering versus the human dietary choices. Another example is moral debate about capital punishment. Supporters of death penalty argue that capital punishment provides justice for heinous crimes, while opponents believe it violates the rights to life and also prone to error. There are plethora of other examples of moral dilemmas like genetic engineering, assisted suicide, social media, free speech. But I wanted to discuss further the communication and how it influences our cultures. The way we think, communicate, and lead is shaped by our language, our culture, and history. Language structures our thought. Culture shapes our values, and history influences what we consider important. Together, these factors shape our decisions, and we're going to take a look at exactly that, how that happens. I wanted to introduce you to the concept of the high and low culture developed by Edward Hall. In high context cultures, the communication relies heavily on nonverbal cues, implicit messages, and shared understandings. Ethical decisions are often made within the context of maintaining relationship and societal expectations. So, for example, in collectivist societies, moral actions are those that promote family or community well-being, even if individual rights are compromised. And examples of such cultures can be Japanese and Southern European cultures. In low context culture, on the contrary, like United States or Germany, communication is more direct, explicit, and relies on the content of the message. Ethical decisions are typically based on the clear rules, laws, and individual freedoms. In individualistic societies, moral actions are those that uphold personal autonomy and fairness, often at the cost of the group harmony. Well, perception, culture, decision-making, cognition are all deeply connected. Gilbert Harman's moral relativism argues that moral principles aren't universal, but shaped by cultural norms that we internalize. This challenges the idea of objective morality. If our thinking is shaped by culture, can any moral belief be truly universal? Let's take a look at the illusion, my wife and my mother-in-law. What do you see? Some see a young woman, others an old one, depending on how a brain is conditioned. Several studies conducted and concluded that own age biases affect subconscious face perception. So younger people saw a younger woman first and older. While this optical illusion serves just as a metaphor for our perception, we realize that different perceptions can lead to forming different values, different communication styles, and decision-making. Similarly, different cultures can view the same moral issues in completely different ways. Let's add some complexity and discuss decision-making and moral dilemmas at high-stake scenarios. Imagine the situation: the ship is sinking, and you can only save one person, your wife or your mother-in-law. If you're a man, of course, for women out there, your husband or father-in-law. There are differences in cultural priorities. High-context cultures will likely save a spouse, and that will reflect the individualistic values, while low-context cultures will choose to save the mother-in-law, which highlight the collectivism and perhaps the matriarchal values. If you are further interested in exploring cultural and values differences, you can explore further the Hofstede cultural dimensions theory, and I will leave the link to it in the bibliography. I believe that our discussion on whether morality is universal or culturally conditioned wouldn't be complete without considering the role of art and science. A few words about art. What's the purpose of art? Everyone's going to have their own answer. Beauty, goodness, truth, expression, moral lesson, you name it. In Plato's Symposium, he believed that beauty is a bridge to goodness. Tolstoy had a different perspective, and what is art? He saw art as the moral duty to society. Let's take a look at several examples of artwork. In Picasso, Guernica serves as a powerful anti-war painting that depicts the horrors and sufferings of the war. Some might find this painting controversial and ethically provoking because of the graphic imagery, because some may feel that the painting aligns with particular ideological movements, and it raises a question of whether artists should bear responsibility for promoting moral values, or whether they have the freedom to explore darker themes without being censored. I wanted to warn you that the next slide contains a graphic image, but I want to walk you through several other examples of the paintings and art forms. For example, Raphael, the School of Athens, embodies the pursuit of intellectual and philosophical truth, featuring Plato and Aristotle in the center. Hirst's A Thousand Years blends science and art, and it definitely provokes a visceral reaction with his glass case where the rotting cow's head is eaten by live maggots and flies. How about this example, the yellow banana duct taped to a wall? I'm wondering if Plato and Tolstoy would have been alive, how they would have reacted to the paintings and other art forms that we discussed today. And of course, which artwork feels the most ethical or most immoral to you? Now, a few words about science and morality. As our understanding of our world evolves, so do our moral frameworks. Just like scientific revolutions, moral shifts, such as abolition of slavery or fight for gender equality, happen when we begin to see old truth in a new light. As moral revolution challenge our beliefs, the science undergo the similar shifts. And I wanted to give you an example of the Kuhn's paradigm shift is when science moves from one dominant way of thinking to a completely new approach. The shift from, for example, the shift from believing that the Earth was the center of the universe to understanding that it revolves around the sun. In the case of the exponential technologies like synthetic biology, Kuhn's idea can also apply. Traditional biology focuses on studying and observing nature, while synthetic biology involves designing and creating the new life forms. As scientific and psychological insights reshape how we understand morality, Elizabeth Anscombe challenges modern moral philosophy by calling for a return to virtue ethics and a deeper focus on intention and character. She was a renowned British philosopher and devout Catholic, which shaped her views on ethics. She critiqued modern theories like deontology for its focus on morality of actions themselves with disregard rather than consequences of those actions. And she critiqued utilitarianism because this ethical theory justifies actions based solemnly on the outcomes rather than intrinsic morality of the actions themselves. In her opinion, both theories were lacking theological or metaphysical foundations, particularly in concepts like duty and obligation. She argued that ethics should focus on virtue and human flourishing, much like Aristotle. Like Aquinas, she believed morality is grounded in human nature and purpose, not the abstract rules. She emphasizes that moral intent is more important than consequences, as seen in her analysis of responsibility in cases like Nazi scientists. While she agrees with Plato on the importance of objective moral truth, she grounds her ethics more on Aristotelian and Thomistic tradition, particularly the idea that morality depends on human nature and divine law rather than the abstract forms. She critiques modern morality relativism, arguing that universal virtues must be understood in cultural context, with moral reasoning relying on practical wisdom. So it's undoubtedly that morality plays a vital role in society, guiding our behavior, encouraging cooperation, and maintaining order. Yet, as moral values differ across the cultures as we explore today, the question arises, are there universal moral standards, or is morality shaped entirely by society? Understanding those balances is essential for navigating today's ethical challenges and, of course, furthering our understanding of the human nature itself. To conclude, here is the bibliography slide, which lists all the sources referenced throughout the presentation, and I thank you for your attention.